Hi everyone, it's Jill Foster here. Time for another PB&J card class. And today's card will be another holiday winter themed card. And here is a look at what we will be creating today. This is a one layer scenic card, very fun to make, and I just love the perspective of that road headed off into the distance that is on this stamp. So this is made using one cling stamp called Woodland Getaway. This is a really fun and different stamp. There's lots of techniques you can do with it. Mine today will feature more of a watercolor and sort of loose look to it. So before we begin, I wanted to mention that I will have a full supply list at the very end of the video up on screen. So if you want to check out anything that I'm using, stamps, markers, colors, everything will be listed up on screen, and you can hit pause at that time to check it out. Now I'm stamping this using my Misty stamp positioning tool, which is going to allow me to build up lots of layers of stamping and colors. I am stamping onto Canson 140-pound watercolor paper. The first color I'm using is just Memento ink. It's just a very light blue, which will give me just a very sort of basic overview of what I'm stamping. And here I'm going in with some Summer Sky archival ink. And with this stamp, it is very, very detailed and it has a lot of layers within it. So if you want to capture more of that detail in your stamping, then I would recommend that you use like a Bristol cardstock or a smooth cardstock if you are looking to just stamp this and not do any painting or watercoloring. I'm going to do a lot of layers and water with this, so I wanted to use a watercolor paper to do this. So here I have stamped it a couple of times just to get onto the paper a basic look of the scene. Now I'm using an ARTEZA real brush marker to color in sort of those distant mountains, excuse me. And so you can see sort of where the tree tops or the line of the trees ends. And so I will use the tip of that marker to sort of go down in between those trees, but it does not need to be perfect. If some of the trees get the dark blue like the mountains, that is fine. Now, anytime you are coloring directly onto your stamp with a marker, you're not going to get perfect application because you're going to see some of those brush strokes of the marker as it goes onto the stamp. So once I stamp that, I am going to just blend some of that ink. Now it doesn't blend super easily on this paper because it is a fairly absorbent watercolor paper. So again, if you want to use water and you want it to blend easier, then you may want to try Bristol cardstock or Bristol paper. Now I'm going to use that same marker to color onto just an old palette and pick that up with some water and just put that right on top. So you can see I'm just sort of working in sections. I'm starting with the mountains and then I'll work my way down. I always like to start light and then I can darken things up as I go. So this will definitely get much darker as I move down. I also think this particular stamp would look beautiful stamped just in one color. If you do that, I would definitely use smooth cardstock and an ink like a VersaFine ink that would capture those details for you. So now I've gotten those mountains done. And here I'm going to move in with a darker blue, and I'm just looking where the trees are, and I'm using a similar sort of a stroke with my marker. So I want it to look up and down, sort of ragged along the top so that it has the look of treetops. So I don't need to get it perfectly like the stamp has it, but just using that as a guide, and then I'll stamp that down, and you can see then you start to get some of those trees. And you can also see my head there. I am so sorry. I don't know, like maybe the millionth video I make, I will remember to not put my head under the camera. I'm so sorry about that. So I've just stamped, and if I see there's areas where I wanted to have more of those trees, I'll just recolor and stamp it down. And then I can go in and just very lightly blend that. The ink does not go too much all over the place on you. You have quite a bit of control with this. Now you could use any water-based marker for this water-soluble marker. Here now I'm going in with an ink pad. So like I said, an ink pad is going to give you a little bit more even coverage and helps when you have a large area to cover. So this is a fern green archival mini ink pad, so I do have some control where I put it. That gets sort of a base layer of that green down, and I will go over the top of it with the marker. Again, sort of having the top of that area that I color having the sort of up and down of the trees. It's not just a straight line across. I'm going to lightly mist that and then stamp it down. And then just a couple of spots here where I wanted to accentuate that, I add it again. Now this, I'm looking at this as I'm creating the video thinking, oh, I really like how this looks nice and light. So I do end up going quite a bit darker, but you can see where you can stop wherever you like your project to be. Here I went in with a water-soluble ink pad, so I'm using Distress Ink in Mowed Lawn, which allows me to stamp or ink up my stamp and then mist it, and that water will get activated with that ink will get activated with water, and you can see that really gives a beautiful loose watercolor look. And I like that for these trees, especially this bright green in here. And then I can also go in and just blend that a little bit, soften it. If there's any puddles, sort of pick those up with my paintbrush before it's totally dry. So I want to dry this before I go on to the next step, because that got pretty wet as I misted the stamp heavily with water. And I will clean off my stamp here. I just use water and a rag to do that. And here I decided I wanted to just darken up the very edge of those mountains. So I inked that with some cobalt blue archival ink. And did that a couple of times. That also picked up more of the details of the mountains as well. And then I am pulling, actually that color I did on the mountains was sky blue, and here I'm doing that cobalt blue along those trees. And I'm just turning my ink pad to the side and using the very edge of that to ink those trees. So you can see once I had that watercolor looking background, now I can go back in with my ink pads and sort of recapture some of the detail right on top. And because of the texture of that paper, you can see I just do multiple impressions. And I'm just grabbing my next color here. And this is archival ink in the color of library green. So again, these ones I am not doing like any blending or misting with, so archival inks are a permanent ink and they work great for this. I just love these particular colors, the cobalt blue, the library green. They're really beautiful. So now here's where I just really dive in there with my markers and kind of do almost some freehand sketches and lines on here, but the stamp has already done the work for me. It's got the perspective, it's got the trees off in the distance, it's got the mountains, and using these ARTEZA Real Brush pens, the tip of the brush is like a paintbrush, and I'm just sort of using a sweeping or flicking motion to give the look of the trees right along the edge of the road. Can go in with blues and greens, just sort of filling in that layer closest to the road, adding some details in there. Then I will go ahead and ink up the road and stamp that just to darken it a bit. Now, at this point, my paper did slightly shift, and I thought, no way, I am not starting over. I don't know if you guys have ever been there with a project where you're like, this is going to be a card. I am going to finish this. And so, actually, by the time I added the shading there on the road, it really didn't make any difference. I think it just sort of added to the snow-packed look. And to do the shading, I'm going right on top of that archival ink. That is the Acorn archival ink with a real brush pen, and then just lightly blending that out with a paintbrush and water. And then I was like, okay, it's fine. The road looks okay, even though it did slightly shift in the misty. And I just continue adding those shadows in there. I think that adds so much to the design, and it's super easy to do. You can't do it wrong because there's enough details in the stamp that will make it look good really no matter what you do. Just filling in a few of these shadow areas along the base of the trees and the road. And right there directly on the road. And then I can blend those out with water. Now that base stamping underneath with the archival ink is not going to reblend. It's not going to start bleeding all over the place. That's why you can easily add the coloring on top with the markers and the blending with the water. And in the end, I actually was kind of glad that had shifted because I don't think I would have added quite as much shading to the road, and I actually really like how that turned out. So sometimes there are just happy accidents, right? Here I'm putting in just a few more tree details with a nice dark blue real brush marker. Sort of, again, that sweeping motion so that the top of it looks like the tip of a tree. I can go over some of those that were already stamped. Again, that stamp just guides me, and use a different color marker to do that. That helps differentiate between the different tree lines that are included in the one stamp. And just add a little touch more shading there to the mountains. Once I was done with my stamping, I am using some gouache paint and just mixing in some water, and I am going to splatter this. I'm covering the top just because I plan to stamp my sentiment up there, and I wanted that to have a nice smooth surface for stamping the sentiment, and it really didn't need to see any snow up there because it was already white. And then I'm also just going to pick up a little bit of that gouache paint mixed with water and add some snow here along the edge of the road, sort of building up there along the edge. And I can go in and add a little bit to the road, sort of blend out some more of those areas on the road, giving it just the look that the snow is falling down right on there. That gouache paint is so wonderful for doing snowy winter scenes. And then I thought, I better splatter a little more snow here. So I'm just watering that down and splattering some more. To finish this off, I just simply stamped a sentiment up at the top. This is from our Christmas feeling set, and I love that the sentiment that I used up in that upper right hand corner is a perfect fit right as the road leads into the background, and you'll see that here on the finished card. I thank you so much for watching today. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, our website, and our blog. And I will be sure to link all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And if you stay tuned here in just a minute, I will put up the list of supplies as promised. Thanks for watching.